Anyway, another day. I don't know if this is interesting or not, but it was interesting enough to compel quite a few individuals to instigate the thought of it, because quite a few people have always perpetuated the echo that I should write a book. I wrote a book. I put it on this website called Homestead Technologies. It was free. I wasn't computer savvy until about the year 2000. That was my first computer. When I got it, I stayed up a week straight, going to sleep in my office chair. I had a condominium. It went up to about $350,000 in value before Citibank stole it during the mortgage predatory poison fraudulent loan scandal. I would sit in my office in my easy chair, the Queen Anne lounge chair that I sit in front of my compact Presario 6000, and I was online for a good 10 or 11 years, maybe, building a website with a lot of history on it, video, art, and things like that. And it all got destroyed when Homestead Technologies started charging us semi-annually so that they could stay afloat, which is understandable. They would charge us semi-annually, and sometimes, because of the mortgage crisis, when they stole my condo, I couldn't afford to pay for it, because I ended up living in a SUV after my car died. When they changed the oil, it was a Buick Cutlass Sierra. They changed the oil, and it has a different type of oil filter. It goes up inside the car, and there are two rubber rings that go around it, and the guy that did it didn't know what he was doing, and the oil leaked out and the engine seized up. So I lost my car, and I ended up helping a friend out, and there was a loan, and I got a Chevy Blazer SUV, and I lived in that for 9 years in the back. I've got video footage on that, as a matter of fact. But at any rate, a lot of the stuff that I was doing back then was conducive to sound thinking and working regardless. But before the catastrophe, I did a lot of driving. I drove limousines for like 7 years, and I worked for a lot of people, because working in Washington, D.C., you work for people who are considered notable and of notoriety, famous because of money. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable for lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank. So when you've got a lot of notes with all the frills on it that people pay more attention to than the actual documentation and what it says, this note, Doesn't say this money. It's not money. It's a note. And so they have a lot of notes which promise to give you something if you exchange it at a Federal Reserve Bank for lawful money. And that gets you a lot in this town. The promise to pay. It gets you a whole lot. We got like a $40 trillion debt lot. But driving those limousines for 7 years, you get to see people flash a lot of that around. But you also get to meet a lot of people that are down to earth, a lot of people that are fun, a lot of people that are crazy. I got to work for 3 presidential administrations that way and drive these people around. Not only that, but we were like the support staff for a lot of their parties. And they do party, and the laws leave when they party. We could park anywhere. We could park up in trees, on sidewalks, anywhere you want. When the party came to town, bartender's ball, inaugural ball, you name it. There were floating parties all over the place. Black Caucus, bankers convention. So I drove for a lot of that, and eating the crumbs that fall off the rich man's table isn't a bad thing at all. I saw huge, like 13 inches in diameter trays stacked full of various small cubes of cheese, crab claws that had already been cracked and were ready to just be grabbed and popped in your mouth like corn, dumped in trash cans. And the ideology behind that is legal liability. If they give it to the homeless and someone fakes that they're sick, then there's all the depositions and everything that cost all that money before the trial even starts to prove that the person was faking, that they, out of everybody that ate the exact same food, got sick off of it. So they throw this stuff out in droves. You name it, I was there. I mean, we did Margaret Thatcher's 70th birthday at Penn Station, and there was like full bottles of champagne that had just been popped for the leisure of it, left on tables. And they rented out the entire atrium of Penn Station for this, and brought in stages and stuff like that, brought in bands. It was ginormous. I mean, I saw Charlton Heston and other people. I was there in the dark, setting stuff up and driving people around. But I've driven for a lot of people. I mean, one night, Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty drove me crazy. These guys are like a fire drill. It was like, Stefan, stop over here. It's like, where? Over there. It's like, I have to watch the road. You know that, right? And they're pointing from the back seat, and they're both I'm in a sedan with these guys. They didn't even take a limo. We're in a sedan. And I mean, these were the biggest party animals I'd ever seen in my life. That was like MTV Awards somewhere back in the 1980s. Like, I can't remember, 85 or 6 or something. Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty, like babysitting, jumping out of cars, jumping in cars. Meet us on the corner. It's like, which corner? There's like 4 corners. That one. And they're pointing and running in front of the car to the next venue. We were all over town that night. Those were some of the craziest guys I ever actually had the pleasure of serving for disclaimer purposes. Tony Bennett saved my life. I mean, I had broken up with my fiance, and that was the beginning of the time when I was homeless. I was actually sleeping in my limo, and Tony had just started his career without people like Lady Draga hanging on him and stuff like that. He was actually doing a lot of concerts. He was traveling like almost over 250 times a year. And he came to town and I was his driver. And my fiance and I had broken up. And I mean, I felt like I didn't have a heart. I felt like all I had was feet. And I tried to stay professional, but it just seeps out. And we were talking. I don't know how we got on the topic, but he said something and he asked me what was going on. The man listened to me complain for an hour and a half. And at the end of it, he said, "You know what your problem is?" I said, "No, Mr. Bennett, what's my problem?" He said, "Don't call me Tony. Don't call me Mr. Bennett, call me Tony." And he said, "Your problem is you're human. You want to be around human beings, decent people. That's it." I mean, and there's just some people that just aren't like that. And he actually calmed me down and helped me out. I mean, he basically saved my life because I was feeling it. Like the edge was creeping up and it was just way too painful to deal with. And the humanitarian in this man, it spurred a relationship on. I ended up working with them a lot of the times when they came to town, setting their shows up and breaking bread with them. People like him, Keter Betts. I set up and did a lot of driving for shows like Cats, Les Miserables, Miss Saigon, the National Symphony Orchestra. I did a lot of work living in the street and being homeless and in and out of place. I had a place, then I didn't have a place. I suffered a near fatal head injury, so there were a lot of blank spots, not to mention experimenting with various party drugs as a child didn't help. Um, that stopped really fast, but I'm sure that there's effects from that. And various blows to the head exacerbated by the last car accident I was in, sleeping, and someone slammed into the side of the car and bounced me around. But during that time, driving was the thing. I mean, it was my thing. I mean, I did a lot of production. I drove for Bush Senior when he was vice president. I brought guests to his vice president's mansion, and the man actually extended himself to me. I was standing there being polished as a professional, just holding the doors open and letting people in and out of the limousine. And he leaned over the balcony to shake my hand while talking to everybody, with Mrs. Bush standing beside him, smiling at me. I think there was like a Cocker Spaniel on the porch, or it was multicolored. I'm not much for politics. I just work here. I don't know a lot of the people that I worked for. I mean, I drove for the Washington Redskins and never watched a game. I was their driver for the 1992 team to and from home team sports and limousines, and then to restaurants or wherever they wanted to go back home. But I had never watched a game. I didn't know any of the players or anything, but I was their driver. So I did a lot of driving back then. And I worked a lot of long, hard hours, but enjoyed almost every minute of it, except the more ruckus kind of little rascals, you could say.